A 4-year-old boy was savaged by 3 vicious dogs. Overcome with guilt for failing to protect her grandson, the grandmother took her own life. A happy family was plunged into a living hell. If you're going to push me into the abyss, why shouldn't I drag you down with me? A 4-year-old boy was out for a walk when he was attacked by 3 vicious dogs. The boy's left cheek was torn open, and his body was covered in bite marks. The poor child could not bear the agony of his stinging wounds. The CCTV footage of the scene was horrific. According to witness statements and the residential area's CCTV, all 3 dogs were on leashes. They simply snapped as they passed the boy. Consequently, the incident was classified as a public security matter. Though the owners admitted their dogs were responsible, they claimed they had no money. The 3 of them paid only 9,852 yuan in total. The matter was settled for the time being. But it was only the beginning. The victim, young Zhong Qingze, and his grandmother, Zhao Gui, after being savaged by, underwent 18 hours of emergency surgery. Before he was out of critical danger, after extensive, the boy's cheek was reconstructed. But it left a horrific scar. Even more heartbreakingly, the dogs had bitten off and swallowed the boy's genitals, leaving him permanently disabled. The boy's grandmother, Zhao Gui, had less severe physical injuries, but she was consumed by grief and guilt. She hanged herself a few days later. As the dog owners were only tenants, they moved out of the neighborhood shortly after. However, about a year after the incident, we received a report from a local district about a brutal family massacre that required our joint investigation. The victims were a family of 4. The husband, Guo Xingang, the wife, Hao Pei, and their son, Guo Keki, and the husband's mother, Qiu Xiumei, were all murdered. The killer's methods were incredibly brutal. The victims were tied to chairs and placed around the dining table. The room was full of snakes and vermin, with the doors and windows sealed. The forensic team found that all 4 victims had muscle-paralyzing drugs in their systems. From this, the killer's process could be reconstructed. The killer used the drugs to render the 4 victims' bodies stiff. They couldn't move, and they couldn't make a sound. They were then tied to dining chairs and abandoned. After sealing the room with a swarm of snakes and vermin, the killer left. These creatures soon began to prey on the 4 victims. After reading this, I couldn't help but weep. What kind of deep-seated hatred would drive someone to this? Not only that, but Officer Liu, pulled out a photograph to show me. Look at the victims' wrists and ankles. There are knife wounds on all of them. I took a photo and looked closer. It was indeed as he said. The case file stated that their tendons and hamstrings had been severed. Their wrists had also been slit. It was clear the killer had left them no chance of survival. Based on experience, this was likely a premeditated revenge killing. And so, the police began investigating the victims' backgrounds. They found that one victim, Guo Xingang, had been involved a year ago in a vicious dog attack incident. This was the case involving Zhao Guiji and Zhong Qingze. As I was the officer who had handled that dog attack, I was naturally assigned to assist with the investigation. Our first priority was to investigate the families of the dog attack victims, namely, Zhong Qingze's parents, Zhong Qiong and Tang Yaming. Since there was no direct evidence, we simply asked for their cooperation, under the pretext of a routine inquiry. Over the phone, Zhong Qiong said they had moved out of the city, and were now living back in their home village, so we eventually tracked down the local police, who took us to the home of Zhong Qiong and Tang Yumin. It was a house situated on the outskirts of the village. The yard was large, but it was clearly neglected, and looked rather desolate. Up against the wall, and a massive peach tree stood in the middle of the yard. It was autumn, and the tree was laden with fruit. Past the tree was a brick-built house. The main room was sparse and cluttered, with only a few basic pieces of furniture. Tang Yumin invited us to sit. Her husband, Zhong Qiong, was nowhere to be, so we asked where he was. Tang Yumin gave a heavy sigh. The boy's father left early this morning. Ever since the incident with the boy and his grandmother, he hasn't been right in the head. He often just gets up and leaves, never says where he's going, and won't let anyone follow him. She wiped away a tear as she spoke. People say he's gone mad. He even took our son out, saying it was for treatment. She sighed again at this point. How can he ever be cured? She spoke with such sorrow. I wasn't sure whether to offer comfort or keep questioning. Eventually, Lao Liu spoke up tentatively. So, Zhong Qiong isn't home right now? No, he left a long time ago. And he took our son with him. Lao Liu then asked about the boy's condition. That, although he had regained most of his physical abilities, his injuries had left him with deep psychological trauma. He was afraid of and refused to leave the house. The whole family had revolved around the boy this past year. To pay for his medical treatment, they'd sold their flat in the city. Now, they were forced to live in their home village. Lao Liu then began to probe her, asking about their whereabouts around the time of the family massacre. Tang Yumin stated frankly that they had taken their child to Beijing for treatment during those days. She even produced the medical records and payment receipts as evidence. We contacted the hospital in Beijing and retrieved the CCTV footage from those around the time of the murders. Zhong Qiong and Tang Yumin were indeed in Beijing. It seemed they hadn't let hatred blind them. Just as I breathed a sigh of relief, another case occurred. This case was just as horrific as the last. Once again, a family of 3 had been brutally slaughtered. This family was also involved in the incident involving the vicious dog attack a year ago. The crime scene was in the village, right next to where Zhong Qiong lived. We rushed to the scene as soon as we received the report. Walking into the caustic site, a family of 3 was hanging from the peach tree in the garden. And the ropes used were actually dog leashes. Once again, everything pointed to Zhong Qiong's family. Old Liu and I were both convinced that Zhong Qiong's family had to be involved in these murders, one way or another. We asked the station to urgently to contact the only survivor among the dog owners involved. Meanwhile, we rushed over to Zhong Qiong's house. As soon as we entered the gate, we heard his wife wailing. Old Liu and I were stunned. We hurried inside. Once in the house, we saw her sitting there, sobbing uncontrollably. There was another man in the room with her. We stepped forward to ask, and learned he was the village head. It turned out that Zhong Qiong had broken into several homes and killed their dogs. As a result, he was mobbed and beaten by the villagers. He had already been taken to the hospital. The villagers had even called the police. Zhong Qiong was currently at the county hospital. From the looks of it, for this latest massacre, Zhong Qiong once again had no time to commit the crime. At the county hospital, Zhong Qiong lay in bed, covered in injuries. The doctor said that apart from a broken rib, his wounds were all superficial. While we were processing the charges for trespassing and killing the dog, information from the local police revealed that the time he broke into the first house was exactly when we were first at his place. In other words, Zhong Qiong simply didn't have the time to commit the second massacre. We tried to talk to him, but he refused to say a word, just staring blankly at the ceiling. While we were stuck in this frustrating predicament, we had all overlooked a detail. A very important detail. Meanwhile, the media were in a report. The headlines became increasingly sensational, sparking widespread panic. Everyone was on edge. Pressure from the top was mounting, demanding we solve the case within 72 hours. 72 hours? Was that a joke? Lao Liu was beside him, but the case soon took a turn. Regarding the owner of the third dog from the biting incident, new information came in. Something had happened to Jiang Hui. He was walking down the street when someone hit him on the back of the head with a brick. The attacker was subdued on the spot and is currently being held at the station. Lao Liu and I were stunned. This wasn't a family massacre, it was a random street assault. And with a brick, no less. The killer wasn't following the pattern. He'd even done it in broad daylight. By the time we reached the station, the officers had finished the initial questioning and showed us his details. The suspect's name was Zhong Jinghai. He was 78 and had attacked Jiang Hui after an argument. 78. Lao Liu and I said in unison. Yeah, the 78-year-old man. If we weren't waiting for you to arrive, we would have released him by now, the local officer explained. Jiang Hui only had superficial given the old man's age. We were more worried about something happening to surname Zhong. Could he be Zhong Qiong's father? Lao Liu asked me. I shook my head. No. Zhong Qiong's father passed away many years ago. Lao Liu and I entered the interrogation room, full of questions. An old man was sitting inside. His hair was completely white, and his weathered, dark face was lined with wrinkle, yet he was in remarkably good shape. Through his thin clothes, you could see the faint outline of muscles. He sat perfectly upright, with a posture that seemed better than most middle-aged men. As we walked in, he looked up. His gaze was sharp and piercing. I felt I'd seen that look before, but I couldn't quite place it. Lao Liu and I sat down in the chairs opposite him. Sir, why did you hit Jiang Hui with a brick? Lao Liu was the first to speak. To avenge my great-grandson. He was direct and got straight to the point. Lao Liu and I gasped in shock. His great-grandson. That explains it. Because back then, the case of the vicious dog never went to court. So we hadn't investigated it thoroughly. We only knew Zhong Qiong's father had died years ago. We never thought to look into his grandfather. I'm responsible for both family massacres, too. You can arrest me now, the old man continued. But why? Why wipe out entire family? Lao Liu asked, incensed, for my great-grandson and my daughter-in-law. To avenge them. Despite Lao Liu's anger, the old man remained eerily calm. Those were living, breathing human beings. So their lives matter. And my great-grandson and daughter-in-law's lives didn't. But your daughter-in-law took her own life, I said, feeling a little guilty, and your great-grandson. Even though his injuries are severe, before I could finish, I suddenly realized something was wrong. Back at the county hospital, I felt something was off, so that was it. That was the problem. I stared at the old man and asked hesitantly. Zhong Qingze, your great-grandson. Is he?